Welcome to the Weather Insights briefing. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. Jeff, a couple days ago, we were talking about a disturbance in the Western Caribbean with a 90% chance of development. Today, we have Tropical Storm Raphael here on November 5th, Election Day in the United States. So, Raphael is currently at 60-mile-per-hour winds, moving northwest at 14 miles per hour, expected to enter the Gulf of Mexico as a hurricane. And we also have a new disturbance that has just popped up in the Atlantic there that has a 30% chance of development as it tracks off to the west toward the Bahamas and just north of Dominican and northern edge of Cuba right there. So another one headed in our general direction. But again, with all the fronts and all the things going on in the domestic U.S. right now, it'll be interesting to see where the tracks go. There is the satellite image of Raphael right now, starting to get some organization, starting to get some better convection around the eye there. Still a lot of that convection off to the east and northeast, as we've seen with storms in the past this year, with the early development stages, all that convection off, kind of a lopsided type storm. So as this thing gets better organized into what's expected to be a hurricane, expect that convection to start wrapping around more. But then when it gets into the Gulf, we'll see what happens when it starts to encounter some expected shear, which we'll get to in just a second. There's a recon. You want to talk about the recon, Jeff?
Yeah, we just have the plane out there, and you can see the center fix. So they had 994, which is the advisory pressure, and they are showing 990 now. So
Yeah.
this is a strengthening tropical storm, likely to become a hurricane. So you can see the Cayman Islands right up here to the northwest. As you mentioned, lopsided. You can see not a whole lot of wind on the west side yet, but some of those stronger winds here in that northeastern quadrant, the eastern quadrant, just brushing the western side of Jamaica here. So you're talking 50 to 60 knots of wind here on the western side of Jamaica, brushing the island. But this is going to be heading up towards the Caymans, and I definitely think the Caymans are going to have a hurricane
Mhm.
as you get into tonight in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, hurricane warnings in effect for the Caymans. You can see the tropical storm wind field right now, that area of orange. So it's brushing Jamaica. That's why Jamaica has tropical storm warnings, but a very small wind field currently. That's expected to grow as it continues to move north and strengthen. Also, tropical storm warnings in effect for the middle part of Cuba and now in effect for the Florida Keys. And then we have tropical storm watch in effect for the other portion of Cuba, the further east, that portion, and then hurricane warnings for the western portions of Cuba. So again, it enters the Gulf, expected to enter the Gulf tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Wednesday, continue on as a hurricane into the middle of the Gulf, and then as it starts to encounter the sheer, maybe slightly cooler waters, a lot of things going on that will start affecting the storm, but it is expected to weaken to a tropical storm by Saturday and Sunday. And after that, the effects it has on the northern Gulf Coast right now of the Gulf of Mexico, United States, is yet to be seen. So we'll have another briefing on this one, but a lot of uncertainty as it approaches, except that it is expected to weaken.
Yeah, let's just be clear. This isn't August and September. If this
Right.
was a track that we were looking at in August and September, I'd be much more concerned
Right.
about this. But this is the first week of November. We have a strong front moving off the Texas coast today. We're likely going to get another front that comes off the coast on Saturday. If this were to come further to the west toward the western Gulf of Mexico, it will be a shell of itself. It is not going to be anything like what we're seeing in the Caribbean right now. So I know we look at these graphics and we focus on these graphics in August and September, and you're like, oh, we're right on the edge of the cone, and this is moving off and towards our direction or towards, Southwest Louisiana. But it's a little kind of misleading at this point because I would even question if this will even still be a tropical storm as it gets up here into the northern
Yeah.
Gulf of Mexico. And we'll talk a little bit about that and the factors that are going to come into play. But I wanted to show the model guidance. It's about as divided as you can get when it comes to
It's a
the
good word.
various guidance here. And so you have the GFS and the Canadian over here on the eastern flank of the guidance cluster. And then you have the European and the red and the UK Met and the blue, which weakens the storm significantly, turns it more to the west, and kind of develop or dissipates kind of the surface system over here in the southwest, south central Gulf of Mexico as we get into the weekend. Whereas the GFS and the Canadians slowly move this up towards the north and continue and weaken it also. And so that is the big question is which one of these scenarios is going to play out. One is eventually going to be the right one here. So it's not going to be both of these, and the Hurricane Center is kind of not committing to either one of these right now. They're going kind of down the middle road, very close to the ensemble mean here, and just kind of slowing the system down in the north central Gulf of Mexico. If it weakens more, it's going to end up coming a little bit more to the west. If it stays a little bit more coherent, a little deeper, a little stronger, it'll probably end up over here towards the Mississippi Delta, or the Mississippi Alabama coast, and so you can see here with the Hurricane Center, like I said, what they're doing, they're not committing to either one of those scenarios just yet. And their forecast track really hasn't changed a lot over the last couple of cycles. So they just kind of bring it up into the Gulf and then slow it down significantly here just south of southeast Louisiana. And so, from a forecasting standpoint, this is probably the best case scenario you can go with right now until we get a little bit of a clearer scenario on where this may be going. And if you look at the latest UK Met that came in this morning, and okay, there it goes. You can see it has sort of joined the GFS and the Canadian solution. It's much further to the west, but instead of lingering this westward in the Gulf, it now turns it northward and makes landfall here in the northern Gulf Coast. And so this may be the start of a trend here where we start to see the UK and these far western solutions trending over towards the eastern solutions. And so the Hurricane Center would, rightly so, be smart to kind of leave this out here in the north central Gulf of Mexico and kind of see what's going to happen to this. And I've had a lot of questions in the last couple of days. Well, what do I need to start doing in Texas? You don't really need to do anything. This is not going to come to Texas, and it's not going to be a hurricane. It's likely never going to be a significant threat to us here in Texas. And this is one of the big reasons. This is the upper level wind shear forecast for Friday around noon Friday. And you can see here's our system in the Gulf of Mexico. It's in relatively favorable conditions. But if this were to move to the northwest or to the north, it starts to encounter very strong wind shear. We're talking 20, 30 knots. And then you get over here towards the Texas coast, you're talking 70 to 80 knots of wind shear. This will just obliterate the storm. There will be nothing left of it. And
Yeah.
so as this kind of comes off to the west or to the northwest or to the north, it's going to encounter this kind of wall of wind shear here in the northern Gulf of Mexico, for a function of this big upper trough here over New Mexico. And that is effectively going to decapitate the storm. It's going to blow the top of the storm off. Same thing here with the European model. Again, noon Friday, you can see 20, 30 knots of wind shear here in the central northern Gulf. It significantly increases as you get up to the Gulf Coast. And so whatever this is in the Gulf of Mexico, it is not going to be a significant threat. On top of the wind shear, look at all the dry air. Again, this is for noon Friday.
Yeah.
And look at all this dry air out here in the western Gulf of Mexico. This is
Wow.
likely behind the front that is coming off the Texas coast now. So if you think it's a lopsided system now, wait till it gets into the Gulf. And
Yeah.
this is going to wrap in that dry air. So you have shear, you have dry air, you have very unfavorable conditions in the northern Gulf once it gets north of about 25 north. And again, like I said, even though this looks concerning on the Gulf Coast here, these factors that we just showed really should indicate a significant amount of weakening as this comes up to the coast. And regardless if it hangs out over here in the Western Gulf or if it comes up towards the Northern Gulf, I just don't think there's going to be a lot left of it. And I really think the impacts here are going to be relatively minor and marginal. Even on this eastern flank, it's not very wet. Yes, you can get some heavy rains interacting with the frontal boundary in this area, but there's greater moisture here in the central plains than over here with the eastern flank of this tropical system. And so interestingly enough, you can see our other area of interest out in the Atlantic. Here comes
Yeah.
the potential for a second system up behind our current Raphael. So again, it looks bad. Some of the graphics look scary out there, but the overall threat here is relatively low to insignificant along the Gulf Coast. Could get some higher tides, some big swells, that type of stuff, some heavy rains, but I don't think this is going to be a big significant threat for the Gulf Coast, and certainly not for Texas.
Yeah, a lot of dry air entrainment with that one too, that second system. And I was enlarging my screen there, Jeff, when you were showing the tracks. Sometimes you'll see an outlier track or something going into Texas. There wasn't even a single outlier track that I could see going into Texas. So you can just see that trough just kind of smashing into it and sending it either right or left. I mean, that's kind of the
Yeah.
choices. So be interesting to see what it eventually plays out. But boy, hopefully you're not on the Cayman Islands right now, or if so, you're making plans to get out of there because that's going to be a rough day for them. And then the Florida Keys too will likely get a lot of rain and wind from this system. But other than that, for the rest of the Gulf Coast states, remains to be seen, although not looking too terribly bad right now. So we'll have another update later on this week. You can get those updates on our Weather Insights YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed and make sure you have those notifications turned on. Also, check out our Weather Insights blog. Jeff, thank you very much. We'll see you on the next one.